Katie, I've got very minimal notes here on her bio because I feel we all know Katie so well. Her day job is she's an Android developer. She's a lead engineer at Bitloop. She's an extremely talented and knowledgeable and passionate Android developer. But I think the main reason we all know Katie is she is also an extremely passionate and dedicated GDG organiser and Women Techmaker lead. She's contributed an enormous amount of time and energy and effort into the GDG and also the Women Techmakers program. We're really happy to have her here tonight speaking about what's new in Android. Everybody, can you please give a huge round of applause for Katie?
Thanks, Luke. Alrighty, so this time you've got me up here doing what's new in Android. So, less jokes than last year, but hopefully you do find some of this a bit fun. Please excuse my voice. I have a really bad cold. I hope you can all hear me. If not, just shout and wave and I'll try and speak louder. I may need my water at some point. So of course, Android, it's a big focus at Google I/O each year. I know we've got these fun things like Flutter, or, Google Assistant, but these things are fly-by-nights. This is where we make our bread and butter. So of course, a lot of stuff happened. I am not going to be able to tell you everything that happened at Google I/O. Like Brett said, I watched all the videos I could to prepare for this, as well as going to all the talks in person. When I was watching the videos afterwards, I watched them at like about 1.5 or 2 times speed, just so I could actually fit them in. So if I start speaking really fast, it's now become my life to listen to things really, really fast. So hopefully you can understand me. So I'll break down what I'm going to talk about. So main emphasis of I/O, the usual suspects, the most impact for users, what will change our developer lives, the boring but important stuff, and what got the biggest ooh. So these things are all my opinion, of course, just from the things I happen to watch and happen to visit. Everybody else has some different opinions. If you have some, watch the talks and give a talk about it. So the main emphasis, and this is just sort of what I got as the main impression of Google I/O. It was on hardening. So as well as Project Marble, and if you don't know, Project Marble is the project that Android Studio has been running under recently, and this has been hardening Android Studio, fixing bugs, performance improvements, not delivering the big flashy features, but instead making sure it's much better and more friendly for developers to use. But I found this was overall, a lot of the APIs were being hardened, being improved, not big flashy features this year, but it's still a good way forward. So every year there's something called the Android Fireside Chat. And there's usually some really interesting questions from that. And this is one of the ones that I thought was particularly interesting for us as developers. Why is everything, specifically Android X, always in alpha? If you've been using the Android X things recently, you would have noticed that you always seem to be updating alpha versions or beta versions, and you kind of wonder, are they ever going to stop and release a stable version? Well, while they're trying to stabilize things, they keep wanting to add new features. And so these new features get shoved into alpha pretty much as soon as the library goes to stable. So it means these alpha versions pretty much appear straight after stable versions. The stabilization takes time, but stable means supported, and they want to make sure that they're really happy with it before they say it's stable, because they will support that API going forward. And Yvette Boyer said that beta is pretty good to use in production. A lot of people worry that they're not using a stable version, but if you're using a beta version, it's going to be pretty good. Here's just a graphic showing the cycle. So don't get too worried if you see something's in alpha. You can very easily go back to the previous stable version or look out for a beta version coming up. So the usual suspects, the usual things that we expect to get updated. Architecture components and lifecycle. Pretty much guaranteed to get some updates. One of the big ones this year was data binding. So they include things like faster compilation, incremental annotation processing, you can use that flag up there, live class generation and code completion without compilation. That was a really cool demo on how that works. really check out the talk if you're interested. And improved, clearer error messages. If you're like me and have been working with data binding a lot recently, the error messages are atrocious. You know, you make one little mistake and suddenly there's like 100 red error messages. They have improved this, and I did actually observe some of this in the last few days. It is a lot easier now to diagnose the problem. They've also introduced this view binding, which is coming up in Android 3.6. And this is a better, more compile time safe way of accessing views. We'll see how it works when it gets released. Also, they've introduced save state for view models, so you can now access your save state within a view model, which is pretty cool. We've got to remember that this is not a database, so just the same way as you pass arguments to fragments or activities, you can't save all your view model data. Like you can't save lists, you can't save giant amounts of data in the save state. So it's not supposed to replace databases or things like that. It's just supposed to pass things like IDs or other information you might need to fetch data from your database or the server. And there were some new Kotlin extensions. These were the ones I found were interesting. So our usual live data observe. They made it a little bit more terse. So a lot easier now to see what's going on. Don't need that little extra observer keyword. Also transformations that, if you're like me, you use a lot. Now they've gone straight to a mapping function. Much easier to understand and remove a few lines of code. Also removing a lot of lines of code is view model instantiation. You used to have a later init, then you have to have all the information in there on create, pull it all out. Now you can do this in just one line. So this stuff's coming up in the new Kotlin libraries. Of course, constraint layout had an update. Now 2.0 and now in beta 1, lots of updates there. Some of the new things are this idea of a constraint helper. I haven't yet played around with these things yet, but constraint helper is not a view group. It's sort of a tag on a widget, so you can have multiple tags on widgets and encapsulate the behavior in the XML and reuse it, things like that. So you could use this for doing motion, animations, other click handling, things like that. So this could be quite useful in the future. They've also introduced this concept of virtual layouts. So this is not having to set all the constraints for every widget if you're using a constraint layout. And if you're like me, that gets really, really annoying. So they've got things for tags you can use for chain elements. And I think this is where it's going to be really, really handy, because if you tend to end up with a lot of chains if you're using constraint layouts. And if you can do that without having to add, constraint top, constraint bottom, constraint left, constraint right for every single element, it'll be really useful. And this also allows some runtime changes. So expect to see this constraint reference IDs attribute. Expect to see that a lot. I think it'll be really useful in the future. Motion layout also had some updates. Animation between two constraint sets or states, if you haven't played with motion layout before. It's pretty cool. They've added in the concept of keyframes and the concept of cycles. So this is where you might have a rotating loading wheel or something like that that also moves in space. So that's pretty cool. They also have added a whole bunch of programming APIs, so you can do this in the Kotlin code. You can change values, listen to transitions. It gives you way more control than you would have had previously. There's also now touch handling and dynamic swipe handling, which you can do from the XML. So you don't even have to touch the Kotlin code if you don't want to. You can put all this straight in the code. And there's multi-state, so you can have multiple states and transition between any two. They even talked about replacing view pages with motion layout, which I'm a little bit skeptical about. So we'll just have to see how that comes out. And of course, Jetpack navigation is a big new thing. So now it's stable for 2.0, and they've added a whole bunch of features in Android Studio 3.4 and above to enable you to manage this in a graphical fashion. There's lots of new documentation and code labs, and that's something they've been really pushing, is to make sure the documentation is easy to read and lots more examples. And in fact, in the talk about Jetpack navigation, there's a really good example, really full featured. So if you're looking to implement, that's something good to watch. One of the really cool things is scoping view models to specific navigation graph levels. So this is where you can have a navigation graph as a part of your app, and encapsulate your view models within that, and then use that throughout your app. You can then access that view model from anywhere else in that navigation graph. So it's a really good way of encapsulating and modularizing parts of your app. They added a whole bunch of new features as well for people who have highly modularized apps and deep link navigation. You can also use dialogues now as well as a destination, as well as fragments of activities. And there's also the concept of Safe Art, which is a plugin that allows you to make sure that you've got safe navigation. So you've got compile time checks on navigation arguments, so hopefully less errors fast. And of course, Kotlin. It was announced Kotlin first, so everybody loves Kotlin. Kotlin is always continually evolving, but now they're designing all the APIs for Kotlin first, without building a Java version initially. They're not going to retroactively change all the other APIs from Java into Kotlin unless necessary, but everything now is being built first in Kotlin. So this includes some new nullability annotations for Android Q. So you can use these and get errors instead of warnings on compile time when you're checking something that may or may not be null. There's some more incremental annotation processing, which makes builds faster. And this is also what's really cool, a new experimental annotation. So this is an annotation you can put over some code that you're not sure if it's going to work. And this is really important if you're developing some libraries and you want your developers who use this to just have a heads up that what they're using may or may not be quite finalized yet, and to expect changes. And it makes your developers opt in to use these experimental features, so they actually have to say, yep, I'm going to use the experimental feature, I'm well aware it may not be tested, well aware it may not be ready yet, so making sure that developers opt into that. There's also that introduced contracts as well, as a way of making sure that we know about return types. The code is less error prone. And as you can see in this example code, it's got the use experimental flag annotation at the top. So it's indicating that we're using an experimental feature, which contracts are. So there are lots of other updates. Go check the talks out if you're interested. So what about the most impact for users? Of course, dark theme. This is going to be the theme that is going to drive us all crazy. So dark theme is coming out. And this means that users using Android Q are able to put their device into dark mode or into power saving mode, where the operating system will use a dark theme and will request that apps also use a dark theme. And this is where you use a dark background or nearly black background to save users power, make it easier to read, and generally make it a bit prettier to look at. So when enabling this in your apps, you've got 4 choices. You can use themes. This is probably the recommended way of doing it. They've added some day-night themes, or you can use the device default themes and override values as you see fit, add some colors, all that sort of thing. There's force dark. So users will be able to force dark apps. And this is using coloring version. I haven't yet seen this in real life before yet, but some people say that it is pretty good, and it doesn't necessarily just invert the colors. There is a little bit of wizardry behind it, but I really feel that for a lot of us who are developing Android apps, our apps are going to look terrible in force dark mode because we haven't built for it. So this is something I really recommend you test early on and make sure that you allow it or disallow it for your app. You can also DIY. So just as we have landscape annotations on our folders and things like that, you can add a night annotation and then have resources just for night mode or just for day mode. Or you could ignore it completely, which is not a real choice. So nobody do that. And foldables. So the key message here was it's not just foldables. We've got to think about large screen devices. And if we've all been good little developers and been developing for tablets and different screen ratios and all sorts of responsive design, all our apps will be fine when we hit foldables. But in reality, a lot of us sit there and force portrait mode or have other restrictions that are just not going to work when we get to foldables. So the idea is if you follow the best practices, your app should just work. We'll see if they actually do. So they also want you to take into account tablets and Chrome OS, because now you can have your apps on Chrome as well. So there's a new aspect ratio tags there, min aspect ratio and max aspect ratio, to enable you to make sure that you can restrict certain properties. They're going to add a minimum screen width of 2 inches for any device to make sure that we're not trying to show apps in like tiny, squeezy little areas. App continuity key, and there's a new compat mode as well. There's also this concept of multi-resume. So in this diagram where there's the blue and red version there, both apps would be running and both apps the user could interact with, and that would be really powerful. And of course, there's a foldable emulator available. Gestures, they're getting rid of those 3 buttons down the bottom of your phone. So it'd be a big surprise to a lot of people. But that means there's more space for our app stuff, make it more immersive for users. They're really requesting that you draw your apps from edge to edge, but you've got to make sure to use the system insets and the system gesture insets to make sure that your gestures are not going to interact with the system ones. But you can override those and indicate that you want to have a gesture be respected in a particular area. And they will still be supporting the 3-button legacy mode, but they're also going to be supporting this new version. And this is a way of standardizing a lot of gestures. I know Samsung and other operating systems have their own gestures, so this is standardizing them all across Android. There's quite a few steps to start enabling this, so watch the talk if you're keen. This is something that they sort of glossed over, but I actually think it'll be really useful to users and useful to us as developers. They're putting a restriction that you can't enable and disable things like Wi-Fi or NFC within an app, but instead they've created this concept of a settings panel. So instead of actually having to create your own volume control or create your own Wi-Fi control, there's now a unified settings panel. And it's quite easy just to call with an intent and then make use of it. This way you don't have to bother developing it all yourself. And I think it'll be quite useful to users because they'll expect this and they'll know what to do with it. So what will change our developer lives? Jetpack Compose. So this was something that was mentioned very briefly in the Android dev keynote, and was sort of mentioned by a lot of people just scuttlebutt around the place. But I went to the talk for it, and it does seem to be the new fancy thing, but it's just not quite ready yet, so we'll see. So Jetpack Compose looks something a little bit like this so far. So it pretty much is creating components with functions. So in the Kotlin code, not in the XML. So no XML required. I think it looks a bit like Dart for Android. So we'll see. And it's reactive programming in Kotlin. So reactive, all the good things about Dart and Flutter, they're bringing to Kotlin for Android. We'll see how much adoption it gets. It's not ready yet, but it's being worked on in the Android open source project. And you need a special Android Studio version. So if you're interested in playing with it, you'll have to go grab that version, try it out. At the moment, there's a lot of widgets that are not available yet. So there's just sort of basic things like image views and text views, things like that. A lot of the main layouts that we would use all the time are not quite ready yet. But give it a couple, maybe 9 months, 12 months, it'll be ready for us. Go check out the link if you're keen. Camera X, new, easy-to-use camera API library. So if you've ever developed apps that use the camera for devices like Samsung that decide to have their own way of behaving, you find it's really, really difficult. So they've now made this library that's consistent across manufacturers. And to do this, they've actually created a whole big test library of devices where they're actually testing this across actual physical devices to make sure that it works with all the new devices. Backwards compatible, which is great. Made the camera lifecycle aware, which should help reduce a lot of boilerplate. And for some of their case studies, it's made a reduction in 75% of the code, which is a huge saving. And you can also use some of the native camera functionality, such as night mode or portrait mode or HDR in your own app, which is pretty cool. And they had a lot of example code in their talk, so definitely check it out. So of course the boring but important stuff. There's this new thing of bubbles, which I think they've just taken from Facebook with their messenger bubbles and decided to make it standard. So replacing these system alert windows, which is what these things used to run under previously, because there's a lot of security and privacy concerns. And this will make it more accessible to us to develop these sorts of bubbles, and also make sure that our users can turn them on or off from the settings panel. At the moment, it's enabled in a developer option in Q, but soon it'll be pushed up to the main settings panel so users can enable and disable this. And essentially, we'll run your activity inside one of these windows, which is pretty cool. So of course, for updates to security, pretty much they were all about privacy, updatability, and hardening. There's this thing called Adiantum, I struggle to say it, but this is encryption that doesn't rely on hardware acceleration, but it's mostly for newer, low-end devices, so it's not backwards compatible. It seems pretty cool. They've added a whole lot more restrictions on people calling private APIs. Apparently, a lot of developers call private APIs all the time through reflection, and they've now added a lot of restriction around this because they don't know why they're calling them. So they've made some of them public and added a lot of documentation on what the correct method is to use. So you might start soon seeing some of the things you're calling not working, so worth checking it out. There's been some biometric dialogue improvements, such as implicit confirmation and passcode fallback. And this is what I thought was really cool, and what I'll probably use a lot of, is the Jetpack security library. This is backwards compatible to 6.0. So this is giving encryption on the disk and makes common tasks easy. For example, encrypting shared preferences, or other encryption tasks and things like that, which are things that you probably do all the time, but you might not have tested everything, or you might have missed an edge case, or you might have to communicate a lot with your other developers to make sure you're doing things the same way. This is a way of making it standard, making sure it's tested, and making sure it's much secure than the roll your own version. So you can check that out as a dependency. So app bundling and test build sharing. So bundling is now the thing to do. Dramatic reduction in app size. With in-app updates as well. There's now managed flow. Sorry guys. So now you can manage users getting updates to your app in a predictable manner. You can also on-demand deliver app functionality. So with new modules, you can deliver them straight to users using a request. Okay. You can also uninstall uninstall modules that are no longer useful to users. And internal app bundle sharing. So you now can give your testers a link rather than having them to enroll in an internal test. Alright, almost done. So what got the biggest ooh? Surprisingly, this was Layout Inspector. So they added a whole bunch of APIs in Android Q, enabling you to do a whole bunch of new fancy things. And this is not yet in the latest preview, but it's coming soon. One of the cool things was you can remember what's happening in your emulator or on your device. For example, if you're scrolling in the device, it'll match what's happening in Layout Inspector. The cool thing is the new 3D mode. Oh, sorry guys. So you can now have your layout there and inspect exactly what component is setting that background or doing something fancy. I think when everybody saw this, they were just like, oh, that's so fancy. I don't actually know how often I'll use it, but it looks cool. Also, what was really cool was the resource manager, and something I think Android Studio has been looking for a while, and us as developers have been really needing. So you can now drag and drop PNGs that are named with some of those 2x or 4x formats, or in non-standard folders, and just drag them in and batch import them, rather than having to go and rename every single file yourself, which if you're like me, you're absolutely sick of. So you can also drag and drop SVGs, and they will convert them automatically, which will just save a whole lot of time. And a whole lot of nice grouping. You can also drag and drop from the resource manager into your app, which was pretty cool, including things like colors, which yeah, works. And there's also a colour picker, which is quite cool too. So lots of stuff I couldn't fit in, especially because I can't speak properly. If you're really interested in these sort of things, go watch the videos. So lastly, what does Q stand for? Questions!